here we go. So welcome and Happy New Year. I am so excited that so many of you could join us to learn more about our 2023 Legislative Scorecard, our priorities for the upcoming legislative session, and how the process we developed, the process we used to develop the scorecard will be used in 2024. I am Julie Archer. I am president of the League of Women Voters of West Virginia. And in addition to myself this evening, you are going to hear from our vice presidents, Lyn Widmyer and Judy Ball, who are in the spotlight with me. So we're going to hear from them. This webinar is, primarily for League members, but we did invite members of the media. And I know we have a couple of reporters on, and I just wanted to thank them for joining us this evening. We also invited members of the legislature, and I know Delegate Larry Rowe had registered, and I hope he will be joining us soon. But he's also a League member, so we're excited about that. And I'm just thrilled with the turnout for this evening's event. Before I turn it over to Lyn and Judy, I just wanted to sort of provide a little bit of context and background as to why we decided to do a legislative scorecard. And really it comes down to voter education and accountability. Ahead of our convention, our state convention last year, we had a virtual social hour, and the topic was to discuss challenges and threats to our democracy. And really one of the things that kind of dominated the conversation was just a real frustration with the lack of progress on issues that are priorities for the league. And so with the scorecard, what we wanted to do is to hold legislators accountable, hold them accountable regardless of party for their votes on league priorities, and to make sure that you, our league members, know how your legislators are voting on our issues. But accountability, of course, extends beyond the league to the voters, that we all, work really hard to educate and inform. So, and I think, everybody knows that it's just like a very daunting task to monitor the legislature. It's time consuming, and it's just be a really daunting task for everyday voters. So whether they agree with the league's priorities and positions or not, we see this scorecard as a valuable voter education initiative. And so we are going to repeat the process that we applied in 2023 to this upcoming legislative session. And I think I'm going to stop there. I'm going to turn it over to Lyn and Judy. You're going to hear first from Lyn. She's going to give you a quick overview of the scorecard, and then Judy will get into the nuts and bolts of how it works and the information that it provides. And afterwards, we'll open it up for some questions. But if you think of something during the presentations, feel free to put your questions in the chat. And I'm going to do a little rearranging on the screen here and put Lyn in the spotlight and pull up her slides. Bear with me just a minute.
Julie.
You're welcome.
Let me just say his background. I'm a 40-year member of the League of Women Voters of Jefferson County. And last year I became vice president on the state board. And Zoom enabled me to do that because it's a long way from Charlestown, West Virginia, the other side of the state. But Zoom has allowed me to be part of this marvelous group. And I'm just so proud of what we're doing at the state. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the legislative scorecard with 7 slides, and then Judy will go into more detail. So next slide. the focus of the legislative scorecard is the West Virginia State Legislature. And as most of you know, it meets once a year for 60 days. The 2024 session opens January 10th, which is next week. With the hundreds and hundreds of bills that are discussed, debated during the 60 days, it's almost impossible for a mere mortal to follow what's going on. And for us at the League, we felt the same way. So the first thing we did was, next slide, is to prioritize what our key areas of interest are. And we have come to refer to these as buckets. And those 4 key areas are strengthening democracy, including making voting easier, safeguarding equal rights, which also includes reproductive rights, protecting children and families, and creating a sustainable future. These 4 key areas have beneath them a series of policies and programs that have been endorsed by the League, studied by the League. So there's a series of further detail under each one. Next. So what is the goal of the legislative scorecard as we follow these 4 buckets of issues? We want to educate people as to what's going on. We want to energize League members and hopefully members of the public to get involved and engaged. And we want to document exactly which legislature voted on what bill and how for each of the bills that become law. Next. And this is a sort of a repetitive slide, but again, the legislative scorecard is looking towards voter education, helping people understand what's going on at the state legislature and what is the outcome of the state legislature at the end of 60 days, energizing our members to become involved, and documenting and recording the votes of each legislator. Next. So, you know, it's pretty remarkable. Our first legislative scorecard was last year, and I think we started it towards the well, it was just a phenomenal accomplishment. And it's a good template for what we're going to do in 2024. And what we did was we focused on 25 bills related to those 4 policy priorities or buckets that I mentioned. We compiled how each delegate voted on each of the 25 bills, every single one of them. And we put it all on a searchable format at the League of Women Voters WestVirginia.org, which Judy is going to talk about more. Next. So what are our plans for the 2024 legislative scorecard? We learned a lot from last year and it was pretty successful. So why mess with success? We are going to monitor bills as they are introduced daily. I'd like to underscore daily. That's 60 days of daily monitoring what the state legislature is up to. We're going to identify bills that relate to our 4 policy priorities. As part of this process, we're going to urge members to make some noise on those priority bills as they move through the legislature. And finally, we're going to compile the votes at the end of the session of each legislator on priority bills that become law. And again, they will be put up in a searchable format. Next. And my last slide is, we have to make some noise, folks. If we are going to be a presence at the state legislature and make a difference, we as the League of Women Voters of West Virginia and individual members, we have got to make some noise. And some of you received in the mail, printed the right way, these little postcards saying, make yourself heard. We're going to continue to do that during the legislative session on bills of interest to us. Please, we need you to respond, react, and follow up and join us as we move to make the League priorities part of our state legislation. So that's just a brief overview of the process. And now Judy Ball is here to talk a little bit more about the legislative scorecard itself. Judy?
Thank you. You want to switch me over, Julie? Good. Lynn talked about our 4 policy priorities, the 4 buckets. But the other priority for us is voter education. And the reason we focus so much on voter education in the league is because if we don't have voters that are knowledgeable, then we're going to continue to have exactly the kind of representation that we have now. And some people may be perfectly happy with that, but there are a lot of folks who aren't. And I'm convinced, I don't have data on this, but I am convinced that low voter information contributes to our dreadfully low voter turnout. In West Virginia, we have a pretty competitive rate of voter registration compared to the nation. It's our voter turnout that is truly dreadful. And we need to fix that, and we hope that voter education will be a contributor. The Legislative Scorecard at its most fundamental base is intended to educate voters. And it is a first for the league. And nobody knew when we started out this process if it was even going to be possible. We know other organizations do scorecards, and we tried to rely on what they had done, but we were essentially building this from scratch, and we were building the plane as we were flying it. We released our first scorecard in mid-October because this was a virgin effort. But we're already preparing for the update for 2024. We're going to use the same methods, the same model, and the same software so that we can deliver it more quickly for 2024. And I'm going to be giving you a tour of what we have up on our website now. When you look at the scorecard, all 134 legislators are there, but you will never find a D or an R after any legislator's name. That's simply not the issue for the League of Women Voters. The issue is how 134 legislators voted on the 25 priority bills we selected. Now, to put that in context, in a single session of the legislature, a couple thousand bills are introduced. The 2023 legislature resulted in 333 bills becoming law. No voter has the willingness or ability to go through all 333 bills that became law. So we did it for you. And out of those 333 bills, we selected 25, a manageable number that we could categorize into the 4 buckets, and then we could report out. The 25 bills that we selected, we started with the 333. We didn't pay any attention to who sponsored the bills, what legislators voted for or against them. That was not the issue. We started with the substance of the bills, and Julie and I negotiated back and forth on which of the bills were important enough, consequential enough to be included to represent our 4 policy priorities, the 4 buckets. The distressing fact was we found no bills out of the 333 that were consequential enough to represent strengthening democracy. We are aware that some bills would have worked against democracy, but they didn't become law, and we're glad for that. But not a single bill passed that would have strengthened democracy, and I think that's really unfortunate and something to keep in mind. We wouldn't have known that necessarily if we hadn't gone through this process. We also found a tremendous amount of variation in how legislators voted on certain categories of bills. For example, the bills regarding safeguarding equal rights. We selected 10 bills in that category. And of the 10, there were 30 senators and 60 delegates that disagreed with the league's positions on every one of those bills. So one could look at that as sort of a failure. On the other hand, you can look at it and say, you know, even if you don't agree with the league, the content of the scorecard can be useful for you. So we are starting to get some feedback on the scorecard, and it seems to be having some positive impact with voters. And I want to share with you one anecdote to think about as before we take our tour. I got an unsolicited email from a total stranger who wanted to share a story with me. She and her friends and neighbors, they had been really unhappy. They had a representative in the legislature who was very conservative and rather reactionary. They didn't like him and wanted him replaced. So they worked really hard to replace him with an alternative that they thought was much more reasonable. When the scorecard came out, they looked up the new guy's voting record. And they were quite disappointed to find out that this more reasonable alternative had voted just like the former guy would have. So now the reasonable alternative has some really unhappy constituents. And I suspect he's going to be hearing from them. They're going to make some noise. So let's turn to the tour. Let me share my screen. Okay, can everybody see that?
Mm-hmm.
The URL for the League of Women Voters website is really easy and straightforward. It's LWVWV.org, League of Women Voters of West Virginia.org. And the scorecard is right there on the front page. Starts on the front page. All the text that's here, and we tried to keep the text to a minimum, but the text is here to describe how we did this and why we did things the way we did, and how we tried to keep it nonpartisan, because we are nonpartisan. And we wanted to make sure that in doing something like the scorecard, that we would do it in a way that preserved our nonpartisanship. So the scorecard's contents, here's a breakdown for how we see the bills that we selected. Strengthening democracy, as I said, we found 0 bills. Safeguarding equal rights, we selected 10 bills. Protecting children and families, 8 bills. And creating a sustainable future, there were 7 bills. And these were not bills that we necessarily agreed with, but those are the ones we selected. So if you go to the second page, you see these 3 buttons at the top. Those give you links to the different components of the scorecard. And again, we have text here that describes what we did and how we did it. So let's go to the bill descriptions first. And every page here comes with a legend at the top that describes what's in this stuff that you're going to be looking at here. What's the content? The right side of the banner lists the items that are in the content. And then under the bill, here are the bill summaries. So not everybody, not even me, and I've been working with these quite a lot, can associate a bill number with what the bill is about. So the purpose of this table is to provide that information. So, for example, these are the Safeguarding Equal Rights bills. There are 10 of them. And all of these are color-coded. And the reason they're color-coded is that we want it to be transparent and make sure that people who look at this understand that some bills the league opposed and some bills the league supported. If you oppose the league, you may want to look at this in the opposite direction. That's fine. We're happy for voters to do that. We just want to be transparent in what we're providing. So all of the rows here that you see that are highlighted in pink are bills that we opposed. Rows that are highlighted in green are bills that we supported. Now, unfortunately, of the 10 bills that we selected to represent the Safeguarding Equal Rights bucket, we didn't support any of them. Those are the kinds of bills that became law out of the legislature in 2023. For example, it's the second row, HB 2007. You notice when I mouse over this is a hot link. If you click on this link, it'll take you directly to the legislature's webpage and give you on that page the complete legislative history for this bill. So you always have access to the primary source as well as the information that we have munched and crunched and put into the website. Now, one of the things we discovered in doing this is that the titles of the bills sometimes don't really do a good job of characterizing what's in the bill. And also the subject categories that are given by the legislature also sometimes don't work very well. So what we did was we included the titles that the legislature assigned the bills. Here's also the status, the effective date, and the position for the league. If you're working on a computer where the color coding doesn't come through so well. But then under explanation, this is the explanation that we have provided. This is our description of the bill that goes into a bit more detail. So while HB 2007, the title was prohibiting certain medical practices, our explanation is about how this bill that started out by banning gender-affirming surgery ended up by providing a pathway for some transgender youth to receive gender-affirming care. Why did we oppose this? Because it was a compromise and it was still a restriction on care for for youth with transgender youth. And so we opposed the bill for that reason. But we wanted to be transparent in how this bill had meandered its way through the legislature, all the different iterations it had been in. So those are here are the 10 bills for safeguarding equal rights. If you want to go to children and families, you go up here and click the link. Again, we have color coding. The children and families bill, a total of 8 bills, and we actually supported 3 of them. So if we scroll down, you see a row here in green. And one of the bills that we supported, HB 3018, was to change the age of consent for marriage in West Virginia. And I remember watching the debate in the Senate over this bill and how it also had changed its features as it was going through the Senate. But eventually it came out with a remarkable and good change so that kids aren't able to marry in West Virginia the way they have traditionally been able to do so. So that was one of the bills that we supported. Here are 2 more. SB 577, that reduced the copay on insulin, and SB 89 requiring hospitals to have qualified staff to perform sexually assault forensic exams. It's a bill that passed, became law, and it's something we supported. And finally, the bills to create a sustainable future. There's 7 bills we selected, and we supported one of these. Our legislature still passes a lot of bills that are pro-fossil fuels, and we wish they would move more toward renewables. And the bill that we supported in this category was HB 3189, the PFAS Protection Act. The PFAS, that's the forever chemicals that are especially problematic in the Ohio Valley and the Ohio River Valley and in the Eastern Panhandle. So those are the bills that we selected, 25 bills in total. And for anybody who wants to use this, you can always go to the legislative history on the website for the legislature. And those links will appear again, so that we wanted to be able to make it as easy as possible to go back to primary sources. So those are the bill descriptions. So I'm going to go next to the summary scorecard. We have a very detailed scorecard here in the center, but then we have a summary. And I want to go to the summary next. And here we have the vote summaries by legislator. And these, what you see here is all the priority areas and all the priority bills, all 25 here in the first several columns. All the legislators are listed here. First, the senators listed in alphabetical order, not having anything to do with their parties. And then the House of Delegates. And you can go up here, and if you know who your legislator is, you can select the legislator just by clicking on his name or her name. So I happen to be in Did I just find something that's not? Oh, there it goes. I happen to live in Senator Clements' district. I got gerrymandered into Senate District 2, which reaches from the Cheat Lake to the Ohio River. Senator Clements, on all of our priority bills, he agreed with the league's positions on 4 out of the 25. That's a pretty low percentage. He's not alone in that. I can also show you, you can also select by district. And so, for example, I'm going to select the districts in whoops. I'm going to have to ask Jonathan to fix this.
You might want to keep moving, Judy.
Well, I'm just going to select. I just want to select the delegates in Monongalia County, because Monongalia County has, unlike some of the other districts, Monongalia County has 6 delegate districts, and it's a collection of different parties, and I want you to see how the agreements can vary quite a lot. We see here the agreement on the 25 bills anywhere from 76%, 84% down to 20%. And that's agreement with the league's positions. So that's how you can select the bills in terms of their agreement. And that's the summary. If you want the detail, if you want to really dig deep, then you go to the middle one here, bill votes, most detail. And here, this is not in terms of whether or not the representative agreed with the league. It's how they voted on the bill. So for example, the color coding here highlights the votes that agreed with the league. But they are, the ends here are votes against these bills. The Ys are votes for these bills. And again, the links to the bills are hot, and they will go directly to the legislature's website for the legislative history if you want to go there. So that's these are broken into the buckets: the safeguarding equal rights, protecting children and families. You see here there's more agreement with the league on some of these bills for protecting children and families, and creating a sustainable future. A lot of variation across the legislators, but sometimes they agreed with what we agreed with. So those are the three components, and this is the mechanism, the method that we will use for 2024 in order to report this. I encourage you to go to LWVWV.org, look up your legislators, read about the bills that we selected. There are only 25 of them. You may be interested in one bucket or the other, or all three, since we couldn't fill all four. Look up your legislators and see what you think. I advise you to do that and get prepared for the legislative session. And we will be following this kind of information as the legislature comes into session, and we're getting ready to start. We're all prepared. Thank you. I'm happy to take questions.
So Judy, we do have and Lynn, we do have a couple of questions in the chat already. I'm trying to get to it. Well, the first question we had was from Kathy Maxwell, and Kathy says that she's new to League of Women Voters of West Virginia. Welcome, Kathy. And she's asking if we put out a weekly e-newsletter during the legislative session. Should I take that?
Yeah.
Well, Kathy, I appreciate your question, and I will say that is not something that we have done historically in the past. Normally, what we do is, send out action alerts or calls to action when a priority bill comes up that we want legislators to make calls or send letters or emails to their legislators about. But we do have a goal, and it is our intention to be more proactive and be in touch with our members more during this upcoming session. And it sounds like Lynn has something she wants to add.
Yeah.
So
we don't put out something of that nature weekly. It's a big demand, but we will be contacting members of the league, and we did last year during the session, where we actually sent action alerts, make some noise alerts to members based on their particular representatives' upcoming votes and things. And we split it up and we divided it. Please, please, please respond to those and help us contact legislators. We just need your commitment to do that and to commit to responding to these make some noise / call to action. Please.
We also have a Facebook page. And when something is important and moving through the legislature, that's also a good place to look. That we'll make a note of it there and tell you where the league stands and what we want you to do. And if you want to sign up to write a newsletter for us, we'd love to hear.
So the next question we had in the chat was from Nancy Briscoe, and Nancy asks, do members of League of Women Voters vote on the scorecard, and I think the question is, do league members vote on the bills that get included in the scorecard? You see Nancy shaking her head. Nance, I'm sorry.
Well, Julie, do you want to go over the process that you and Judy used to sort of make those commitments? I would only say that the legislators moving so fast and furious. We dealt with this issue in terms of how to get the league engaged on these issues in a timely manner. And maybe Julie and Judy, you could talk about how you work together on that aspect.
You want to go ahead, Judy?
Yeah, since we had never done this before, we decided to take it in stages. I'm a sort of, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And that's how I go about things. And what we did was we started with 333 bills. And Julie, bless her heart, went through all 333 and selected the bills that she thought ought to be in our scorecard. And then I came along behind her and disagreed on some of them. And then Julie and I sat down and negotiated which ones were consequential enough to be included, which ones were really not significant enough, we ought to just leave them out. How many was too many? We'd never done this before. We finally decided that 25 was a reasonable number, but we didn't start out saying we're going to select 25 bills. So I think it's plausible that this could be done by a vote or a larger committee, but I would advise people before suggesting that in earnest to consider the amount of work that this takes, because it was a lot.
Yeah, I don't know if I have anything to add to what Judy said, except that, you know, we do have a legislative action work group, and we welcome more. You know, we are an all volunteer organization, and we welcome other folks to join our legislative action work group, and which will be taking the lead on the scorecard process and putting it together going forward. So. If anybody else has questions, feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat. I'm just gonna look here in the.
May I just chime in? And I think a couple of people we should recognize for all their work on this. One is Jonathan Rosenbaum, who put together the, I can't even say what he did because I'm so not good with this technology stuff, but he put this all together with Judy, that whole scorecard. And then we had people on L-Law, Nancy Ulrich and Joe Golden, who were instrumental in getting this all together and following some of the issues. And we have had volunteers. Neil Barkas is going to help us follow the environmental bucket. So it takes a lot of people who have really chipped in this past year.
Yeah, I see that Cynthia Nelson from Morgantown has suggested that y'all should give your representatives feedback in real time during the session. The thing you need to know, if you've never followed the actual workings of the legislature, 60 days flies by. And this legislature, unlike some in other states, when 60 days is up, midnight on the 60th day, they're done. They're out of there. And whatever bills are still pending are dead, which sometimes can be a good thing. But because things are flying through, real-time feedback is essential. And don't expect that you can sit down and write a letter, put it on paper, stick a stamp on it, and send it to the Capitol. Things will be long gone before that even gets there. So email, text, contact your representatives in real time and start now. You don't have to wait. They're getting ready right now for January 10th. And you might actually get heard if you contact them now. So the next question was, will the 2024 scorecard be available well in advance of the November election? Well, the 2023 one, we got done and out by mid-October. Never done it before. We still got it out by October. And we got a late start. So one of the reasons we expect to be able to get the 2024 scorecard out in a timely way is because we're going to use the same methods, the same technology. And so given those two things in particular, because that was the time consuming part, we do expect to get the 2024 scorecard out well in advance of the November election.
Do you want to, we also have a question from Neil.
Oh.
Neil Barkus asks, why are only bills that pass in the scorecard? Some of the most important ones would fit in the 4 buckets are defeated or otherwise die.
Neil, you're absolutely right. And we talked about this. We debated this and decided that ultimately the ones that die are off the table, at least for a while. And so what we needed to do for accountability purposes was focus on the ones that actually became law, because those are the parts of the products that come out of the legislature that all of us are going to have to live with. The stuff that dies, we can wait for another day. So that's why. But this is something that we did debate, and it is something that might be useful as a supplement, but we're a small group and we have to do stuff that we have the capacity to take on.
If I could chime in, I think also what this scorecard process has taught us, or at least me, is the importance of having coalitions with other groups that have similar policies and priorities. So hopefully that is something we'll be able, as the scorecard gets more and more presence and outreach, that we'll be able to form more of these coalitions and maybe have more people power to do more, but hopefully.
So there's a question here about how many league members are campaigning in 2024. No league member is campaigning as a league member, because that's not nonpartisan. Are there members of the league who are running for office? I have no idea.
I do agree with Susan, though. We need more women. We need more women in office.
Yeah.
And Susan also says, I want to say thank you for all you're doing to keep the public informed. So thank you, Susan. We appreciate it.
Yeah. And Cindy Nelson says, also write letters to your local paper, pointing out what's going on that affects your community. Yes, I have to mention, since Cindy has brought up feedback a couple of times now, Cindy Nelson from Morgantown is the person who has been the mover and shaker behind the monthly column that the League of Women Voters now has in the Dominion Post, the Morgantown local newspaper. And it gives us an opportunity to write about, we rarely write about things having to do just with Morgantown and Monongalia County. We mostly write about stuff having to do with the state. And our most recent column was about getting ready for the legislative session and what the league's priorities are
It was fabulous.
and what voters should be doing. So thank you, Cindy. If you don't subscribe to the Dominion Post, maybe your library has access to it. The column is published the last Sunday of every month on the opinion page.
Is it on our league page?
No,
Really, they're really worthy of widespread readership by league members. I don't know how we would do that, especially this last one.
Can we develop 4 teams that review and all relevant bills and then follow your process to evaluate and score? We can talk about that. I'd be happy to talk about it. LLaw has been recruiting additional people to participate. But when we tell people that means meeting twice a month and who knows how often during the legislative session, people aren't nearly so willing anymore.
But they're only an hour.
Yeah, sure. Can you do searches by topic in the state legislative website? Yes, and sometimes they're wrong.
That's true.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It's not there. You can do it, but it's not reliable. So
Yeah. Yes, the League of Women Voters of West Virginia has no paid staff, although we do have a lobbyist.
Yes.
Julie is our lobbyist.
So, you know, again, members of the league, we have a lobbyist at the state legislature. We have this LLaw group, which is monitoring all this stuff. We have the Legislative Scorecard, which is published. There is every member of the league should feel energized to participate by following what the league is doing and getting engaged and involved in getting their opinions to their legislators. There's just no reason not to, and we could make such a difference. So,
and I think that's it. And I think that kind of answers to some extent Neil's second question is about, well, if we wait till after the bills are passed, how are members supposed to make noise? Well, our goal is, and our plan is to be in touch with members throughout the session when priority bills are moving and urging calls to action from league members.
Yeah, if you remember, we talked about monitoring daily. That's our goal. And this isn't all going to wait until the end of the session when the laws have been passed. That's when the scorecard decisions can be made. But as far as making some noise, that has to happen January 10th, probably January 11th. And we'll be doing our best to make sure that we know what's happening in the legislature and advising our members to make some noise. Somebody mentioned something about continuing resolutions. That's a federal thing. If we do anything on the federal level, we sometimes communicate with our state representatives in Congress or our senators, but for the most part, that all goes through the National League.
Let me just chime in on one thing with the National League. I just wanted to point out the National League has realized that the state leagues are very important and that a lot of the action that the league supports is taking place at the state level. And they are putting out a new effort to help the states more, which I think is a very positive move.
Yeah. Oh, somebody wants me to pull up the legislature's website so people can see how to track bills. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen. So you can Google West Virginia Legislature and look for bill status. And at the top of the page here, there are these drop-down boxes. Bill type, there are bills and resolutions. You're probably interested in bills. Select the year 2024. Just the other day, that didn't have 2024. And this is the regular session. So submit there. And of course, at some point, there will be here the all bills link, and they put in some demo bills to let you see how to do this. You can also track bills. So if you see something you're interested in and want to keep track of it, there's a button here for bill tracking. You make an account. It's a free account on the legislature's website. You give it a user ID and a password, and you track. You can take the bill that you're interested in, hit bill tracking, and it'll go into that little database, so that rather than having to search for that bill again the next time you want to look at it, you can just go to your bill tracking database and pull it up, and it'll show you what the status is. So wvlegislature.gov. You
Judy,
can.
can you put the link? Can you put the link in the chat?
Yes, I just have to. Oh, there's the chat. It moves around. There you go. So you can search for bills by subject, short title, sponsor, when they were introduced. There are a whole bunch of search features here. And once they're actually bills, you can there'll be a drop-down box for the subject areas. But once again, the kinds of subjects that they put on them at the legislature, it's not very reliable. I was tracking election bills last year, and one would have thought it would have been really easy to make sure that all the election bills were categorized under elections, and they weren't. So, other questions?
I don't think so. I think we got through everything in the chat, and it is almost 8 o'clock, and we did want to keep this to an hour. So if there aren't any other questions, I will close us out. And I just want to say that we're thrilled with the turnout. I'm so glad that you all could join us this evening. As Judy and Lyn both mentioned, starting next Wednesday, our Legislative Action Workgroup will be monitoring votes and actions of our legislature in relation to our top policy priorities. And our buckets, as we like to call them, are strengthening democracy, safeguarding equal rights, protecting children and families, and creating a sustainable future. And if you go to the website, we do have sort of a more fleshed out version of the priorities that gets into some more detail. But as Judy and Lyn have both emphasized, we cannot do this work alone. And we need league members to raise their voices in support of league positions and league values. And in this current political climate, that often means speaking out against bad legislation. And, we can't sugarcoat it. During last year's legislative session, there were bad things that happened, but there were more bad things that were averted because people like you were paying attention and spoke up. And, Lyn mentioned in December, we sent out these postcards, and the message on them is, if you're happy with the if you're happy with the policies from the West Virginia legislature, all you have to do is be silent. But if not, make yourself heard. And so we hope that you will go away from tonight's presentations and discussion, move to take action. Move to take action. And if you're really fired up, we hope that you will join our Legislative Action Workgroup. But please, please be on the lookout for our action alerts via email, and join us and make some noise when we call on you. So thank you so much again for joining us, and have a good evening.